Stuka Joe here, and today, instead of going directly into the playthrough video, I'm going to give you two examples of combat, and we'll go through the steps of each combat situation so that in the video we can present each combat in a more expedited manner. Let's take first a combat situation involving two forces. In this example, Irving McDowell has been activated. He has a command rating of 3, so the Union has spent 3 command points and 3 points of dice difference to activate his force, which consists of 5 Union strength points, and his force will move 2 hexes to the south for the purpose of attacking Beauregard's Confederate force, consisting of 3 Confederate strength points. And to do so, McDowell's force will have to cross the Rappahannock River, which is a navigable river, and occupy Beauregard's force hex, which is a woods hex. In this game, to attack, a force must end in the hex occupied by the enemy force to be attacked. So McDowell's force moves into the first hex and then into the hex occupied by Beauregard's force. Beauregard cannot retreat before combat because he's not a cavalry leader. His force is not a cavalry force, so we have a battle to be resolved, and in order to aid the explanation of how the battle is resolved, we will resolve the battle in a display that doesn't come with the game. This is the display we will be using. Let's place the forces that are participating in this battle. So here we have the leaders and the strength points, and right off the bat we see that the Union with 5 is attacking the Confederates with 3. In this game, the combat results table has columns for odds as well as for certain differentials. Let's take a look at the combat results table. Here we see the top part of the combat results table. It is organized in columns by odds, combat odds, and differentials. The combat odds columns is column A, 1 to 3, B, 1 to 2, and then the next odds column is column J, 2 to 1. Then you have K, 3 to 1, and L, 4 to 1. If you have an attack that is 1 to 1, you have to determine the differential between the attacker and defending force. For example, if you had an attack by 5 combat strength points like this one against 3, that would be a +2 combat differential, and it would be resolved on column F. Now let's say if it were the other way around, you would have 3 against 5 combat strength points. You would use this -2 column here. Of course, if it was 3 against 6, then you would use the 1 to 2 column. So in certain instances you will use odds, and others you would use the differential column. In this particular attack, we have 5 Union factors attacking 3 Confederates, so it's going to be here on the +2 column. Then you see there's an S, an N, and an L. In this game, there are 3 types of forces based on their size. 1 to 3 strength points is a small force, 4 to 9 a medium force, and a large force is 10 or more. Now the Union has 5 strength points, so it is a medium-sized force. So the Union will roll. For example, if it rolls on this column, the F column, we will locate the result for the Union die roll in the M row of whichever die roll results. And since the Union is attacking, we locate the effect on the defender. So we would use this subcolumn here to find out what was the effect of the Union attack on the defender using the medium row. Now, when we roll for the Confederates, which have 3 combat factors, that is a small force, we would locate the effect on the attacker, this subcolumn here, and we would look and consult the result on the S row according to the die roll result. Now, those are the columns. So as there are certain situations that will create column shifts. and one of those or two of those are present in the combat situation that we will see now. So we start with column F because there's 5 Union strength points against 3 Confederates, so it's a +2 differential. However, the Union force had to cross an unnavigable river, and that causes column shift to the left. So now we're at column E, which is the 0 column, but there's another shift that applies for terrain. The Confederates are in a forest hex, and that is another shift to the left. And now we will resolve the attack in column D. And before resolving the attack, we have to determine the die roll modifiers that apply for leadership, and we turn to both leaders, Beauregard and McDowell. Looking at Beauregard, he has a 1 as a tactical rating, so he gives his side a +1 die roll modifier. Now we look at McDowell's tactical rating. It is also a 1, but it is in a red box, meaning that McDowell confers the enemy a +1 die roll modifier. So the Union will not have a positive die roll modifier, but the Confederates, instead of a +1, they will have a +2. So now we roll the die for the Union attack. The result is a 2, and we consult the result on the combat results table. So here we see the result, and we use the M row because the Union force is a medium-sized force, and the effect on the defender, the Confederates, is a dot, meaning no effect. So the Confederates suffer no loss, and now we roll for the Confederates, and it is a die roll with a +2 modifier. The Confederates roll a 3 modified to a 5. So we locate the Confederate result here on the attacker subcolumn, the effect on the attacker in the S row, because the Confederate force is a small force. The Union force is demoralized. So in this particular combat, the Union loses the combat, the Confederates suffer no loss, and the Union force is demoralized and now must retreat. But before retreating the force, we have to roll for possible leader loss. And here we have the leader loss table. Both leaders here are 3-star generals, so it is very unlikely that they will suffer any wound or killed result. We roll 2 dice for each, and only on a roll of 2 they will be killed or wounded. So let's roll 2 dice for each of the leaders. The roll for Beauregard is a 6, no effect, and it's the same, 6 for McDowell, so the leaders are unaffected. So the end result here is that the Union force is demoralized and is retreated from the combat hex. And the Union force must retreat into the hex from which it entered the battle hex. And that's the end of that combat situation. This next example involves combat between armies. Armies are larger structures when compared to forces, and they have various advantages in that the tactical ratings of subordinate leaders can be added to the die roll of each of the armies, and the commanders, instead of providing a tactical die roll modifier, they provide re-roll options, and we will look into that in this example. Now, the Union activates Sherman's Army of the Tennessee, which is in Decatur, northern Alabama, and in this game, armies have what is called a reaction radius that is comprised of the hex that they occupy and the 6 hexes surrounding the hex that they're in. And whenever any enemy force or army moves into their reaction radius, then the army may react in various ways. And we're going to look at several of the ways in which the army in this case the Army of the Mississippi, will react to Sherman's move. Sherman moves his army into this hex here, adjacent to Bragg's Army of the Mississippi. The hex into which Sherman moved is adjacent to the Army of the Mississippi, and therefore it creates an opportunity for that army to react. Reaction is not automatic. To be able to successfully react, the reacting army must roll 1d6, and the result must be higher than the command rating of the reacting army. So in this case, the Confederates need to roll 4 or more. And in this case, a 5 is rolled. So Bragg can successfully react, and he has various options. He can react away from the Army of the Tennessee, and he could move into this forest hex as well as this one and this one, or he could move directly into the hex in which the Army of Tennessee moved. He could not move into this hex, which is adjacent to the Army of the Tennessee, nor into this one either. So the choices are these 3 hexes, away and not adjacent to the Army of the Tennessee, or the hex where the Army of Tennessee is or has moving into. Now, Bragg obviously would like to move here because it would create a problem for Sherman. There would be column shifts for a navigable river, which is the Tennessee River here, and that would be 2 column shifts to the left, plus 1 column shift because the defender would be in a woods hex. Now let's suppose instead that Bragg rolled a 2, so he cannot react. And now Sherman continues his move, and remember that in this game, armies have a movement allowance of up to 4 hexes. So now Sherman moves into the hex occupied by Bragg's army. That hex is also in the reaction radius of the Army of the Mississippi, or say the Army of Mississippi. So now Bragg can roll again for reaction. The roll is a 4, so the Army of Mississippi successfully reacts, and Bragg does not want battle where he is. So the Army of Mississippi cannot react into the hex from which Sherman moved into, so it will move to this hex. And Sherman has used 2 of his 4 movement points. Now Sherman doesn't want Bragg to continue in this easterly direction so that his army cannot join another Confederate army that is off to the east. So this time Sherman moves into this woods hex. That move is also into a hex in the Army of Mississippi's reaction radius. So now we roll again for reaction. The roll is a 6, and Bragg now decides to react into this hex. Now Sherman only has 1 movement point left, and he decides to move into the woods hex to the northeast of Bragg's army. Now Sherman ends his move here, but Bragg can still react. And let's suppose that Bragg, just for the sake of argument, wants to attempt to react in order to move and cause combat with Sherman. A 5 is rolled, so we would place both armies in this woods hex, and now we would have a battle between 2 armies. So here we have both armies, and the attacker is Sherman's army. Sherman is the army commander, and subordinates are Sedgwick and the cavalry leader Wilson. The rebels have Bragg as the army commander, Hardee as a subordinate, and also a cavalry general, which is Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now, when we look at the initial odds, it is 12 combat factors against 9, and that is a +3 combat differential. So we begin in column G. But in this particular case, the Confederates occupy a forest hex, which shifts the column for combat 1 to the left. So now we're at column F, and that is where we will resolve the combat. Now, this is combat in which there is at least one army. So now, the rating for reroll options is in effect. The reroll option rating for Sherman is that small 2 there. So he confers 2 reroll options for the Union. And we place these reroll option markers as a reminder. Now, Bragg's reroll option rating is a 1, but it is encased in a white box, meaning that he gives 1 reroll option to the enemy. So the Union now will have 3 reroll options. And a reroll option is simply the option to reroll either the attacker or defender's dice. So let's take a look at how this is going to work. We now check for die roll modifiers. The attackers do not use the tactical rating of the Army commander, only of the subordinates. So we have a +1 for Sedgwick and a +1 for Wilson. So the Union die roll will have a +2. On the Confederate side, we have a +1 for Hardee and a +2 for Forrest, for a total modification of +3. Now we roll 1 die for each of the sides. And remember that in this case, the Union force is a large force, 10 or more combat factors, actually 12, while the Confederate force is a medium force. Medium forces are those that are 4 to 9 strength points, and the Confederates have a medium force. So the Union rolls 1d6. So the Union rolls a 2 modified to a 4, and the result, the effect on the defender is demoralization and 1 strength point loss. Now we roll for the Confederates. The Confederates roll a 6 modified to a 9, and the effect on the attacker on the medium row is a demoralization and 2 strength points of loss. And now is the time where the reroll options kick in. And the Union will spend its first reroll option to reroll the Confederate die roll to see if they obtained a less damaging result. So we roll 1d6 again. The result is a 2 modified to a 5, and now the Union suffers a demoralization and 1 strength point loss. And it is the same result that the Confederates receive, but if the battle ends there, the Union will have lost because it failed to dislodge the Confederates, obtaining the same result as the defenders. So the Union will use another reroll option for the purpose now of rerolling the Union die and trying to attempt to get a better Union result. So 1d6 is rolled. The result is a 5 modified to a 7. The defenders are demoralized and lose 2 strength points. The Union still has 1 reroll option, but a reroll option doesn't ensure a better result. So the Sherman decides not to exercise that reroll option, and this is the result that will be implemented. So the Union loses 1 strength point, and from 12 strength points that it had, it now has 11, and it is demoralized, and the South loses 2 strength points, and now has 7, and it is also demoralized. Next, we roll for leader loss. No effect on the Army leaders. No effect on Hardee nor Sedgwick. No effect on Forrest. Wilson rolled a 3. He's a 2-star general, so he is killed. and he is removed from the game, and we return the pieces to the map, and the army of Mississippi has to retreat. Both armies are demoralized. And that's the end of that combat example. And this is the end of this combat example video for the Civil War by Victory Games. I've been playing this game on my own this week, getting reacquainted with it. And the next video will be turn number 1 of the 1861 scenario. That scenario has 3 turns, and because of the unique mechanic of this game, turns are variable in their lengths, but it is most likely that each turn will be substantial, and we will be filming 1 video per turn. So the next video will be turn number 1 in the 1861 scenario. So until then, this is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.